I guess the blood running through my veins. That's what I am. Like, I'm Zimbabwean. So like when I'm not accepted by Zimbabweans, it does really hurt me a lot. I guess it does hurt, because it's like you're not accepted by the British, and then you're not accepted by the people that, you know.
Because you're westernized in their
you're
way.
westernized effectively, so you're not accepted by them either. So then if neither of you want me, like, what am I? Dude, I'm always going to be black. Like, I'm always going to be black. Like, I can't pretend to be anything else. So I'm of Zimbabwean descent. Both my parents are Zimbabwean, and then I was born in the UK. You said something earlier about finding a perfect middle ground between your two identities. Like, I don't really believe that exists, to be honest. Like, there's no middle ground as far as how other people perceive you. Like, that middle ground that you find is from self-validation, not from validation of others. Because to someone else, you'll never be Zimbabwean enough. Like, yesterday, I was out and two of my friends are like, oh, but you're just not Zimbabwean, like, you're just not Zimbabwean type thing. And like, I get why they say that, and I really do understand, but then it's like, okay, but if I'm not Zimbabwean, what am I? And then they say I'm British, but I don't feel like I'm British. And I'm sure like there's people in England who are like, no, you're not British, go back to your country, blah, blah, blah. Like, with people, with finding validation in others, you'll never win.
I've lived here for about probably 10 years of my life. Lived in America for about 5-6 years, and in England for the remaining. So yeah, that's me. There's this phrase for people, I guess like me, but it's called akata. So basically just means that someone who comes back home to Nigeria or whatever, but you weren't raised here, you don't know the culture, you don't know anything about it. So I know how to speak my language and everything, but my uncles and aunties even, they question, like they ask my parents in my language, like, does he understand what I'm saying? But like, I fully understand. It gets annoying when it comes to a stage, because like, I know my culture. I might not know it to the fullest extent where I was living there and everything, but I understand it. I've learned about it from my parents and everything. And there's not really much you can do to show these people that, oh no, I love my culture, I love my background, apart from just be a part of it, I guess. So there is difficulty in that, because I'm not exactly the typical Nigerian to actual Nigerians.
With the teenagers just wanting to fit in with their peers and not stand out, not be too different, it's really tough. Whereas the younger ones are quite happy to feel proud of where they're from, where it can change a little bit when they start to hit that 13, 14-year-old and peak around that age of 16, when their groups are really important, and who they are at school matters more than who they are in their family at that time. So yeah, and when that clashes with their own cultural identity, it creates a lot of, I think, inner conflict within those individuals, but also within their families. And their parents may feel rejected as well, so they may be more likely to be more, I guess, harsh with their kids, or because they're really upset. So they're trying to, get them into shape and make them respect their culture, and it can come across as maybe too heavy-handed. And then they're more likely to push it away, but then at the same time they can get the bullying from their peers as well, and pressure to conform to the norms of the country. So they're in a really tough place. Lots of conflict to sit within.
Like just probably about 3-4 months ago, I was just in Woolworths and someone started swearing at me, cussing me out for no reason. And then I looked at him and I was like, say it again. And then he came closer, he didn't say anything to me, just stared at me. And obviously the Woolworths workers were there watching me, and so were other people there. So I just decided to turn around and walk away. Because I know if I had did something at that very moment, I'd be the one that's portrayed in a negative light. They wouldn't realize, oh, this black person was instigating me. They wouldn't say anything like that. They'll just say, oh, young black kid in Melbourne attacks a white man,
My sister experienced some bullying from a couple of girls who weren't very nice. They would already know what to do at lunchtime, and the games that all the kids would play, but Sarah and I had to learn them from scratch. And I don't know, people kind of found that weird, like we weren't experienced, we lacked English speaking skills, and it would just, I don't know, it made us feel like outcasts in a way, that they didn't make an effort to involve us in those activities.
So coming from New Zealand, I was playing rugby my pretty much whole life. And then I came over here and then I started playing rugby again, but the rugby culture is not as strong as what it is in New Zealand. So I felt like pretty excluded, because most of those kids that were playing rugby already were like friends and all that kind of thing. And because it's not a massive culture, there's only few people that play rugby. So if you don't really get along with that group, there's no real other team that you can join so that you can get along with everyone else. So yeah, I think there was exclusion there.
And I really want to point out that because personally, as a Korean, so many people ask me like, did you flee your country and do you want to live in Australia forever? Because it's obviously better country. And I'm like, no, we're not eating cockroach. We're not in Korean War anymore. Like North Korea is now taking us. Like, come on. And obviously your background is South African, so you must have that kind of questions a lot.
Yeah, mainly because I'm not fully black or I'm fully white. They're very confused, and it's often is your mum black or is your mum white? Like, yeah, I get those kinds of questions, and I don't really take offense to it because it's just because they're not educated in that kind of like the history of South Africa. So I don't blame it on them, but at the same time, like, yeah, it's always constantly getting those same questions, and like, oh, you're probably glad that you moved over here and all that kind of thing. Like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, it is. There are things that they can improve, but there are nice things about the country too. But like Australia is not perfect either. Like, it has its downfalls. So yeah, I think it's a bit ridiculous to say that this place is better than this one just because of certain factors.
I was going to Zimbabwe, I think for the first time in memory, and like they're like, oh, are there like starving children there? Are you gonna go and see the giraffes? Like, does your grandma live in a hut? Like, typical racist stuff. But yeah, like, it was only after I started to kind of discover my culture a bit more and assimilate less into being, I guess, white, being British, that I kind of felt different. So I just don't feel as though like I can ever fully assimilate into the British culture, even though like I am British, because I'm not white. Like, that's just how I feel. I'm sure other people have opinions about that, but that's just how I feel.
For example, the Nigerian culture is very different to the Australian culture. So they will do their best to assimilate where they can. And you find it hard because even in attempting to do so, people bully you for that. And when you don't attempt to do so, people bully you for that. So there's no real avenue for success in terms of doing that. So you really just have to discreetly become more ingrained in the culture, I would say. So in regards with me though, I didn't really ever try to fit in with the Australian culture. Maybe because coming from England and America, I was just being myself, and then being myself was enough to fit in, I guess.
Slowly started like using words in Afrikaans with my parents, and then putting like sentences together, and yeah, so it's pretty much trial and error with my parents. So yeah.
My sister and I started a podcast called Refugees on Air. So in collaboration with Student Youth Network, SYN Media, we decided to just start up a podcast to share interviews of like inspiring stories of refugees who've gone through hardship and struggle and are now successful. We've released about 12 episodes, and I guess that we try to do it maybe to make sense of our own stories, you know. Being able to share the stories of others helped me share my own story. There was one instance, I was in a Year 5 class during music class, and the teacher got a phone call on her like red Blueberry, I remember that, and it was her mum, and she was just saying that there's a bomb going off really close to the school and she should just leave, and the teacher literally packed her stuff and rushed out of the class, just leaving like a bunch of Year 5s in there. And I remember everyone was like, oh, like what's happening, and people just kind of started crying and just, you know, wandering around, like not sure what to do. I'm always going to remember that I had my upbringing there and I learnt my values and beliefs from there, so they're going to stick with me for a long time. But, you know, those experiences don't define how I think and how I feel now. They just happened and I learnt from them, you know. That my dad told us that we came here for a reason and we shouldn't let the small things let us down, you know. Other people shouldn't be in control of how we feel.